Welcome back to another episode of the Know Your Power podcast. I'm your host, juliarene.
And I'm your guest, Zach Blakeney. Is that how that goes?
Yes. And then I'm used to having Kendall, and Kendall says, and I'm Kendall Grandma.
Or should I said, and I'm your crawdaddy guest.
Yes.
I'm your guest named Crawdaddy.
Yeah. Zach's new nickname is Crawdaddy because he was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah.
So he's Crawdaddy.
I'm a Cajun boy.
Yeah. And sometimes when I give him nicknames, most of the time, actually, he doesn't like them because they're like Goober or Chubby Monkey or what was the latest one?
I don't know.
Yeah, he just tends to not like him because
Some
they're always
sort of
silly.
demeaning way of justifying your love for me.
It was funny because like yesterday, I have a text group with my mom and sister, and in that group, it's like we were going from like loving each other and showing like cute pictures of our dogs and like what's going on with their life to like ripping each other new ones. And Chloe, my little sister, messages, this group is like 50% like cute dogs and what's going on, and another 50 of that like just being mean and bullying each other. I'm like, yeah, that is love.
Yeah. Welcome to Julia's family.
Yeah, for me, it's like if I like tease you or like bug you a little bit, it means I love you.
Yeah. I get that.
So that means I love you the most because I do it to you the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. No.
No, Zach's a little more sensitive. He's like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, it's a joke, bro.
What do you mean I'm chubby?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you call me a bulldog face in the morning. That's another one.
That was because, guys, when Zach literally has basically sugar, fat, dairy in the morning, his face gets so swollen that it like sags like a bulldog.
Yeah, like
So I was like, "What's up, bulldog face?"
I mean,
he's like, "What?"
Well, we even went to the ice cream place that's like less calories, whatever that place is.
Yeah.
And I still had a bulldog face the next day. I was like, I thought there's no sugar in this. What's going on with this shit?
See, even you believe it. You have a bulldog face.
Look. I'm not saying that. I'm just insinuating it.
You're not saying no, though. I'm not saying yes, and I'm not saying no. So what does that mean?
Oh, well, that's a good thing to start talking about.
Yeah.
Denying your reality doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I never do that. Anyways, guys. Well, today, the guest is Zachary, as you could tell. Zach's my boyfriend, my lover, my crawdaddy, my chubby monkey. And Kendall is on sabbatical, meaning I gave her a break this week so that Zach and I could do this podcast.
Yeah.
But today, obviously, you've heard what the title is, and we're going to talk about our individual journeys of turning pain into power. Zach and I have very different stories, but also very similar at the same time. And once we got together, we kind of realized how similar they really were, and you'll kind of hear how I connect them a little bit towards the end. But as you're listening to this is already the first day, and we've already launched the KYP program that I've been teasing you guys about for like weeks now. So we're talking about this because this is really what the program's going to be about. Yeah. It's really going to be about turning your pain into power and purpose. So we wanted to talk about our individual stories. So
yeah, I mean, building a mindset, like an unstoppable mindset, and also having the confidence to reveal who you really are, your authenticity, comes through you discovering who you really are. Mm-hmm. And really, it's a process of remembering. And I'll just talk about that for a second. Like we talk about finding ourselves, and there's some truth to that in the sense that we learn through our experiences, and every experience gives us an opportunity to learn who we are. And also experiences give us the opportunity to learn who we are not. Mm-hmm. So in learning who we are not, we find out who we are. And that normally is the painful part of things. So let me see, I want to say this. I became very skilled at learning who I wasn't.
Yeah.
And even more so, I found that through my own journey of peeling back layers of what isn't true, we will gaslight upon gaslight upon gaslight upon gaslight yourself. And what I mean by that is that you will tell a story that is protecting another story, that is protecting another story, that's protecting some sort of deep fear that you have. Mm. And it's the deep fear that is running the show.
Yeah.
And it's very challenging, painful, and rewarding all at once to really start to go inside and figure out the ways that you're limiting yourself. Because there's only one type of limitation, and it's a self-limitation. So for me, and I know there's a lot of people that have listened to this show and listened to the Fit Couple show and have known about what my life was like before I met you. But I'll start with a story. And the story is that me and my ex-wife were leaving the gym. And as we were leaving the gym, she went to grab my hand and she said, "I need to talk to you."
Ooh.
Yeah, we know those.
Heart goes to your butthole.
Yeah, those 4 words in any relationship.
We need to talk, ...
So for me, that stimulated a lot of anxiety.
Why?
Now, it might stimulate a lot of anxiety for a lot of people, but for me, it was the culmination of hiding a porn addiction from her and the world, or doing my best to hide it.
You weren't doing a very good job.
No. Well, now that I can sit where I am now, human beings are the most transparent beings on the planet. You can hide nothing, even though you think you can. So it really started back when I was 14, and I've done a lot of interesting stuff around porn addiction now, just in a sense of like researching and things like this. And there's a common belief that like if you had a porn addiction, you had a mom or your daddy issue. And I'm not here to deny that that might not be the case, but I am here to say that when I look back at my childhood, I look back and say, wow, I was privileged enough to have the state-of-the-art computer, to have a beautiful home to live in, to have a really cool vehicle when I was 16 and 17. Like I didn't want for anything. I mean, I did, but like really I had everything I needed. You know what I mean? So I don't see myself as having one of those issues. I just was a 14-year-old boy in a basement with a brand new computer and high-speed internet. And that led me to start being curious about sex, because I was like, fuck, man. Up to that point, and babe, you were little during this time.
How old was I?
Well, shit, what, 4? Yeah, it's really gross when we do it that way.
Yeah.
But
I was 4 and you're a freshman in high school.
Yeah. About that. Yeah, actually I was the youngest kid in my class. So I was 14, I was a freshman.
God.
But prior to that, there was just like what I would like to call like Skinamax, which is like Cinemax, which is where you could find some of these things, but it was always
Skinamax?
It was always fuzzies. It was always, so I'm watching like, it was like fuzzies. You could like make out bodies, but it was like fuzzies. Again, you won't even understand until you saw it. So anyways, the revolution of being able to see things clearly and be able to see all the different things that my mind wanted to see when it came to women and sex and everything else was exhilarating. And also there was a happy ending. So that's how it got started. And then over time I began to feel very safe. And also there was excitement around doing what I was told I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, humans like that.
Yes, we do. I mean, it's the mystery. It's the allure. And it's also when you tell a human being you can't do something, the first thing they say is,
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it twice.
Yep. Watch me. So again, my religious upbringing with Catholicism was very ritualistic. It was very, there wasn't a lot of explanation around sex. Matter of fact, sex by most of religion and society has been mostly shamed. So when you think about shame and you think about what is a symptom of shame, it's hiding. So if you feel ashamed about something, you are going to hide it from other people. Try and convince me otherwise, because I've never found somebody that wasn't hiding something from somebody else because they didn't like what they were doing. And if you go deep into the causality of that, it's shame. And the reason why you're hiding it is you're afraid that those people won't love you anymore. Or they're going to judge you for some sort of thing. So for me, all of those things kind of came together where this became a very private thing. And I also felt shame about it because of what society told me sex was. And also you can't have sex before marriage. There's another like religious thing inside of that, right? So I'm like, or you can't masturbate. So as I did this over time, I started to become very anxious socially and less confident. And, I didn't have awareness at that time. I didn't know why. I mean, like, it's kind of like this weird duality where, like, I knew why, but I didn't want to accept why. So I was denying that porn had anything to do with all these other areas of my life that I was not meeting my expectations. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I was a star basketball, football, baseball player, and all the way up until high school. And then I quit on basketball and football, even though I was really good at them. And the baseball was the only thing that I kept. Mm-hmm. And I was really, really good at baseball. But then when I got to college, I started playing college ball, and I ended up, injuring my arm, but also just was unwilling to rise to the occasion of the next level of who I needed to be successful at the college level, which is really strange because I moved around my dad was in the military, so I moved every 3 or 4 years to different places. I had to continually prove myself and my skills in sports over and over and over again because of how I was moving. So why, when I got to college, was I not rising to the occasion? Well, now I can look back and say, oh, well, I'd been literally watching porn at that point for 6 years, 7 years. And then once I moved out and got my own computer and my own laptop and had my own space, the frequency of how many times I would do it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a day. Like, it got bad. I would tell my roommates that I was studying, quote unquote. And really, I was just indulging in this thing. And it was this thing that was ultimately holding me back from feeling truly who I am. Mm-hmm. So then I had a whole bunch of failed relationships, and those failed relationships came from, one, not being able to be transparent. I mean, what we know about our relationship now is that the more transparent we are with each other, the more connected we feel. So I felt disconnected. I didn't love myself. So, of course, if I was trying to love somebody else, I was seeking love from them, like, love me, because I don't love myself, but then simultaneously rejecting their love because how could you love me because I don't love myself? Mm-hmm. And over time, this anxiety was building. I was experiencing physical symptoms of PEID, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, or PIED, yep, and was just socially anxious. I then started having fear in the bedroom. And that fear in the bedroom is something that still pops up for me sometimes with you. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that before, and I love that we have that transparent relationship. I mean, that's in my program.
Yeah.
So I recognize that that's the case. So, leading up to the point where me and my ex-wife got together, and then it started to heal itself a little bit, but only because I was, again, using her as a crutch to say, oh, I can do I don't have to do this anymore. I've got this great relationship. Into a year, things start to fall back, things start to lessen in intensity, and I start to fall back into the habit. But at that point, then I started to pick up drugs. So, hardcore drug use when it comes to some of the things that, you would think about in that way with the party drugs. Did that for 2 years. And then obviously while that's happening, I'm still watching the porn, and, she's finding little clues everywhere along the way that I'm denying and I'm lying about, right? Like, straight up in my face. Lying, so that's also a part of my program. And I recognize that as well, that I have this tendency when I get get in trouble, when I get myself in trouble, then I go to being dishonest because I don't want to be perceived as being bad. Mm-hmm. So that's in the program. So all of that just leads up to this point where we're walking out and we go into my truck. And she looks at me and she says, let me grab your phone, or let me have your phone. And of course, dreading it, I was like,
you're like, okay.
Here you go. And then she went to the in-private browsing, and in the in-private browsing, again, this was 16, 17, something like that. And I was an Android. So I've said this story before, and some people are like, in-private browsing doesn't save your searches. Well, my phone did. And whether or not it did it, well, it did do it for me, so this could all be discovered. But she goes and she hits, Google, and then the most recent searches come up, and, they're the things that I would never want anybody to know that I was looking at. Mm-hmm. And she says, what's this? And I said, not me. Didn't do that.
As if she's not holding your phone.
She says, hey, this is your phone. Who else would this be? I said, somebody hacked my phone. It wasn't me. So now while I'm saying these things in reaction, there's another voice inside of me that's saying, tell her the truth. Tell her the truth. And then a third time, if you don't tell me the truth right now, I'm going to leave you. And then my initial reaction was the same thing. It wasn't me, but then I said, but I did do that. And what an interesting duality.
It wasn't me, but I did do that.
It wasn't me, but I did do that.
Well, it wasn't you, but you did do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So like, it was. I did it. I needed to own up to it. I created those actions.
But it
didn't feel true to who I really was.
Okay.
And that's when I actually had the first question that I asked myself that started to lead me down this journey, which is, who's listening? If I'm sitting here and I'm having this experience and my reaction is to say something, but then there's another voice inside of me that I can listen to.
You're like, who's in here?
Who's listening, right? So then let's fast forward a couple of months. And, this was one of the hardest things that I needed to heal from inside of that relationship was that, she had chosen to stick around for a little bit. And I went 90 days, actually went 120 days scot-free. And whenever I tell other guys this that are deep into porn addiction, they're like, you say it like it was easy. Hell no, it wasn't easy. I mean, it was 120 days. I devoted to 90, but it was 120 days of no masturbation, no watching porn, no having sex, no anything. Mm-hmm. And the reason for this is the biological reset of your quote unquote program so that you start to diminish the triggers and everything else for watching porn. It was hard as shit. Like, it was one of the hardest things I ever did, but I had this motivation of not wanting to get a divorce. Mm-hmm. But once I did that, I started to feel really proud of myself. I was like, ooh, I'm doing this thing. And she comes home and, as you can tell, she doesn't want to talk. And at the time, I would have been what's called anxious attachment. Mm-hmm. And she was anxious avoidant. So an anxious attachment style is that if something is wrong, I need to talk about it right now. And if I don't talk about it right now, it's not okay. And I'm not okay until I talk about those things. Yeah. I brought that into our relationship, and that's something that I've been, I don't know, I'll ask you for a reflection. I feel like I've gotten much better at being able to let things go. Yeah. And she was anxious avoidant, which means that I don't want to talk about this right now. I'll talk about it when I talk about it, and the more you push me, the more I'm going to push away. So those two styles together do not work well. So I kept pushing her to want to talk because she was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, okay, I want to talk about this. She's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. All the way till I pushed her to the point where she locked herself in our closet. Now, I want to say that when somebody locks themselves in their closet, they obviously feel physically unsafe. I didn't do anything that would make her feel physically unsafe, but emotionally unsafe, yes. Yeah. And I was sitting on the other side of the door, and I'm like, please don't leave, please don't leave. And this is way more emotional at the time than I'm describing it. I'm doing so out of respect for you, baby, because I love you. And I know that we have our own, viewpoints about this, but I just want you to know that. And finally, she swings open the door, and she says, I want to die. And she starts running for the kitchen. And at that time, I just figured she was running for the kitchen to get a knife, so I moved myself into the door frame, and I blocked her from running to the kitchen. And I said, please, don't do this. I'll go. Please don't do this. So that was a really hard moment for me in my life because I had then realized that whoever I was had stimulated the person at the time that I loved the most to no longer want to live on this planet. Mm-hmm. But while that was happening, it was like my life flashed before my eyes, and I saw like all the choices that had ever led up to that moment were there. It was like I was watching a movie, and I'm the character. But then another question popped up: well, who's watching? Mm-hmm. So these two questions of who's listening and who's watching were kind of my motivation on top of wanting to truly understand what happened to me while I was in addiction to start learning about these things through the process. But those two questions are literally, in my experience and my belief, that those two questions are the questions that will guide you to truth. If you really ask yourself who's listening, who's watching. Mm-hmm. Because you might find that the person or the thing, whatever, that is listening and is watching is really who you are. Mm-hmm. and that the two voices that you have inside of you are also who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is that you can observe these two parts of you.
Mm-hmm.
The classic
devil and angel,
right? And you are the head in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is you as the observer. And you can observe both what we can consider the devil or your shadow side,
mm-hmm.
or you can observe and you can listen to your angelic light side.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the power to observe and choose. Observe and choose. So that brought me to this point where I am today, where this, what I call experiential truth, observing and choosing. What I mean by an experiential truth, there's truth. Truth triggers people. When I say the truth, they're like, that's not the truth. This is the truth, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's called a relative truth, meaning that what I believe to be true, you don't believe to be true. So it's relative. An experiential truth is something that literally every human being on this planet can experience. So observing and choosing is experiential truth. We all have the ability to do so. So when you find an experiential truth like that, that is the beginning of your liberation. Once you realize that your thoughts are not you, because just as you can listen to a bird and that bird isn't you, on a deeper plane, it could be. On the physical plane, that bird isn't you, and you can listen to it chirping. You can also listen to your thoughts.
Yeah.
So that also makes your thoughts not you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, bringing this all the way to, that was kind of like the pain and everything else of what happened. It brought me to this place of the initial point of liberation, which is that experience of understanding that. Mm-hmm. And then you start putting that into practice. And that's where things get really difficult. Mm-hmm. Because your program that you've built so far, which is also built off your ability to observe and choose, just choosing the darker side of you, if you want to say that, has now become so ingrained inside of you and who you are, it's now moved into what we call the subconscious level, where at the subconscious level, it's reactive. Hey, this experience happens. This is how I react. I react this way because I've chosen to react this way sometime in my past, and I just keep repeating that reaction to the point where I don't think about it. That's subconscious, basically, programming. Mm-hmm. Well, your subconscious programming is typically made of who you are not. It's typically made of the belief systems that your parents had, that religion had, that society has about what it takes to be a man, your beliefs in God, what it means to be successful, whether you're a failure. I mean, like, we can just go down the rabbit hole of all the things that people tell you that you are.
Yeah. I mean, even a good question to just ask yourself during this time with all of these, you know, values or beliefs or ways that you see the world is like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And that's been one of the most pivotal moments about understanding why I think the way that I think about certain things. Let's take like money, for example. Like, all of us have some sort of money mindset. And it comes back from either seeing how our parents handled money, maybe our brothers and sisters, maybe how it was talked about. I know that one common theme with money, and I know this kind of is going off, but it was just a realization that I made for myself recently. And a lot of people talk about money as being like evil and it's only for the rich and, you know, you can do bad things. So I realized for a long time that that was my mindset on money. And then I would have to ask myself, well, where did this come from? And I was like, well, it had to be my childhood. You know, it had to be from there. And also just society has always kind of labeled the rich, you know, quote unquote, or the wealthy as people that are mean, yeah, or they're doing it from a place of evil, or that's where the phrase money's the root of all evil comes from. So me, I've had to like subconsciously unwire that and be like, well, okay, I don't want to think that way about money because that's giving me this result and this is the result I don't want. So what can I say now instead that's actually more aligned with the future that I want? And that's been like, money makes me more of who I am. And if money makes me more of who I am, I know who I am. And I'm not evil. I'm not greedy. And I know that what I want to do with more money is going to serve and help people. So just stopping and pausing and asking yourself, like, where does this come from? Where did this come from? Is it actually mine?
Yeah. And, abundance, which is what we could say is like just the recognition that everything is available to you, including money, right? Has no limitations, has no conditions. But we've put conditions on money. And this is something that I'm still working through, and you know this, right? And so, for instance, when I was growing up, my dad was in the military, and he's all about saving and pinching pennies, right? And that's what I witnessed. Now, my father has done really well for himself. I mean, he can live out the rest of his life. He's fine. He's done a great job saving for retirement. Let's just say that, right? And again, we had everything that we wanted, but there was always this reluctance to spend money. So even though I came up in a good family, upper middle class white family, the view of money is that it's precious, don't spend it, hold on to it. And interestingly enough, I have gone through the process of not treating it so preciously as I've been a business owner. I've been rather reckless with it when I really look back at where this is. Yeah. So I realized that you can have all sorts of responses and reactions to what you observe. Yeah. And what I did with that is I said, well, the way to make money is to spend money. I bought into that idea.
You can buy into the exact same view or the complete opposite. Yep. It's the whole story of the sheltered kid who goes out and dyes their hair and pierces their nose and starts having sex early because they were so sheltered. Humans like to do what humans are not supposed to do or told not to do.
Yeah. And then there's also the other belief that comes from money, that money is hard to make. It's difficult to make, right? And then that can create a whole bunch of things, beliefs around that, which then block you from getting money because you think money is difficult to make. So.
Yeah. That was also mine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so these are just examples, right, of the conditioning that we have, but ultimately the amount of pain and suffering you're experiencing is because of you agreeing to how the world should be and, more importantly, how you are without asking yourself the question, who am I? You're just like, oh, this is who I am. So that's if we were looking at I like to use the yin and yang as a teaching tool, and there's a black side, there's a white side. You could think about your program as, let's just call it the black side. Doesn't mean it's evil. Doesn't mean it's bad, but we can consider it dark. Yeah. It's the part of you that you would rather not be. Yeah. And then through that, I went on my own journey of learning about epigenetics and neurochemistry and neuroplasticity and, what happened to me biochemically with my body and addiction and all these different things. And I learned so much about myself just by questioning my reality, questioning who I was, and also having the courage to start to speak about what I know to be true. And what I know to be true about this reality and why we're all here is very uncommon. And it's still something that, I'm stepping into, which is this deeper understanding of taking experiential truths and being able to say, hey, these things work. They work for everything. They work for doing your own inner work. They work for creation. They work for being able to discover who you really are. When I say inner work and I say discovering who you really are, that's a little bit different, because doing inner work is a lot of exploration. Yeah. It's a lot of trial and error. And it's a lot of, I think this is it. And then being like, oh shit, that's not it. Oh, I think this is it. Oh no, shit, that's not it either. I think this is it. I've been in that loop for a while. So then you get to the point where it's like, oh, now I'm discovering. It's exploration to discovering what's true. And then once I have what's true, now I have, I've got my program and I got who I want to be. And then the work needs to be done. And this is where the program that we have put together is designed specifically for that. Is that when you feel stuck, it's because you're stuck in your program. Yeah. And you desire to be more, do more, create more, feel more. You want those things. That's coming from your light side. That's coming from who you really are. But you have to overcome the program. And when I say overcome, it's really an interesting thing to say that, but I'm going to use that word. You have to overcome the program by stepping into courage. And you really only step into courage by having a baseline knowledge of who you are to be courageous from.
I usually like to call it, you just come back home.
Yeah. Well, like your podcast, not your podcast, your YouTube series, The Journey to Nobody, right? And what we call our training as well. It's all centered around that. It's like it's a journey back to remembering who you were before the world got a hold of you.
And that's what this program is about.
Yes. To really realize that, and I can say this, and anybody that listens to any podcast around here, and if you've heard this before, it is what it is. You can recognize it as being truth, but there's a difference between recognizing truth and experiencing it, is that you can create whatever you want to create in your life. Matter of fact, you have been creating, and you create it every second of the day. When you're subconsciously unaware, you're creating. When you're consciously aware, you're creating. You are always creating. And if you just look at the results in your life, which is just looking around and seeing what you have, what you don't have, what you're displeased with, what you're happy with, all these different things, the only way that I've found so far for you to truly transform is to take responsibility for all of it. Take responsibility for the things you don't like, things you do like, the people that hurt you, how you've hurt other people. Once you take responsibility for all of it, then you can see a little bit more clearly. Actually, I could say that you see with 20/20 vision at that point. Because how can you shift something in your life without accepting that it's a part of your life? You can't. Like I said, you can deny reality all you want, but reality wins. It's right in front of you. So when you muster up that courage to start really transforming, the process can be long. It can be frustrating. It can be isolating, especially when you try and do it alone, because a lot of things start happening around you as you start to shift.
Yeah, I mean, because, even the people around you that know you to be this thing that might not even be you, it might just be a mask of you or a product of your environment. So once you start changing, people around you act like they don't know who you are anymore because you haven't been that.
Yeah.
I always like to bring it at least back to fitness because this is, mainly fitness and mindset podcast. But when I started changing and being more of who I am and focusing on spirituality and personal development and fitness and getting healthy and really focusing on those things, the people that I had around me weren't doing any of those things.
Yeah.
They had a very specific view on how their life was going, and that was great because that was working for them. But then all of a sudden there's questions like, she's different now, she's changing, like we can't hang out with her like we used to, she won't go out with us anymore. It's because I wasn't actually being who I was for such a long time that people really thought that that's who I was. It was like I was walking up to them being, hi, my name is Julia, but it wasn't me. So then when you start to change, whether it's through personal development or maybe you start focusing on your health a little bit more, the people around you might be like, whoa, what's going on? I signed up for this version of Julia. I didn't sign up for this version of Julia. And there might be some quote unquote costs to that, like losing people. I get a lot of DMs about people that are trying to move away from a friend group because they don't align with their values and their goals and what they want to do with their life, or even a partner, which can be even harder because when you put so much time and energy and effort into friendships and, romantic relationships or even family members, sometimes there seems like there's a greater cost because you've put so much effort into that. You don't want to let it go. And ultimately that past life, if you will, is still pulling you back to being that person that you're trying to grow from.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things like the more you try not to be who you are, the more you are what you do not want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did want to say something when you were talking about we were talking about the isolation and everything else, but that's why we created this program to not only be a group and then created the community that we have for it as well, but also the event, the 2-day transformation event that we're doing at the end of the program. Like I said, it can be isolating, but when you're doing it around people that have a like interest in growing, like even if whoever becomes a part of this program and the community and what we're doing, just by wanting to be a part of it, you're connected with everybody else that comes into it.
Yeah, you just have to think of like all the other girls around the world that see the program and they're like, I want to do that. I want more out of this life. I want to really figure out who I am and who I'm not. There's a bunch of other girls everywhere else that are thinking those same thoughts as you. So even though you might not live by them, these are your soul people. Yeah. So that's what our purpose of this program too is, not only to help you grow through these things, but to also find other like-minded women to connect with that you might not have known before. Because there might not be anyone in your circle right now that wants to do the work that you are willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something called the law of lid. The law of lid basically says that you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang around. Yeah. And that's very true. It's been very true for me as well. Because just like, picking up belief systems from your parents and everything else, like your friends who are around you, whether you are doing it consciously or subconsciously, whatever they're saying, you are taking in.
Yeah. Yeah, we've all had that group or that boyfriend or something to where you go into the group or you get in that relationship and you change every aspect of your personality because you're trying to fit into this relationship the best that you can, even though it's not you.
Well, yeah, and that's how you lose yourself through the process, right? That's a people-pleasing tendency. Something that we're going to talk about a lot in the program is really understanding how people-pleasing is selfish. And a lot of our ego mind has tricked us to believe that people-pleasing is serving other people, except for the fact that you're doing it out of fear that they won't like you. And that's the selfish aspect of it. And then through that process, you lose yourself, and then you become resentful towards them because you aren't who you are going to be. Well, you never chose yourself in the first place. So, how were you expecting anything else to happen differently? It can't. So another thing that needs to be unwound is just this perception of what's selfish, because choosing yourself and choosing what you believe to be your purpose and choosing your own healing and truly wanting to express who you fully are is the greatest way that you can honor yourself.
And ultimately honor the world, because now you're here on this planet, not roboting around the place, but you're ready to serve and be a good human in society.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, too many times we hide our fears behind this idea that we're serving other people. But really the fear is that we're afraid that we're not good enough for other people, so we focus too much on them. So if you really want to understand how to be as the best servant you can be to others, it's about serving yourself first, right? Choosing yourself. And then through choosing yourself, you are choosing other people. Because it's not that you don't want to serve them, you do want to serve them, but how can you serve them when you are not loving yourself, when you're not taking care of yourself? How can you tell other people to take care of themselves if you don't do it for you?
Yeah. This is why on airplanes they tell you to put on your life vest first.
Yeah, the mask.
Yeah, and the mask.
Yeah, maybe the life vest too. I don't know. I
life
just
vest with the blow-in.
We've been on so many flights at this point, they don't get my attention anymore.
I know, which is sad. Because it's funny because every time I'm on a plane, I'm like, I should really listen to this one day. Because I might, I can't get stuck in it won't be me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so, the journey that we've both taken has been, pretty incredible to reflect back on. I mean, when you think about where you were, maybe before we got together, you went through a pretty low time before we got together. And then the whole being next to you and watching what has transpired in your life. A lot of that, actually, all of it has come from you stripping back layers of what you've been told who you are and discovering who you really are through that process.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to tell any stories about that? I'm like, yes. I'm sitting here teeing you up.
I know you. I knew you were. That's why I just stared at you. I was like, I know what you're doing. Sometimes, honestly, I sit quiet just to see how much he'll talk. He'll just fill space.
I always can do that.
I know, it's funny.
But this is your show.
I know. This is the Julia show. Da-na-na-na-na. Anyways, yeah, back to me. It's enough of you. It's enough of you.
Queen Julia.
You've probably heard my story before, but we've had a lot of new people on the podcast, a lot of new people finding the podcast. So, and I'm super happy about that because we're loving the content that we're putting out. But for me, I guess it all started when, at least I'm going to add my little fitness aspects to it because that's important to like who I am. But I was a wrestler from 15 till 18, and I was like the only girl on an all boys wrestling team. And I loved that, of course, like I didn't really want to, wrestling was never my choice. My first choice, rather. I was like, I need to be on the dance team because that's what girls do, even though I don't like dancing, and that's never who I was. So didn't end up trying out for that. Tried out for volleyball, and I realized like I'm 5'2". This is not going to be my career. And my brother told me to do wrestling, and I was like, of course, no, because it wasn't socially acceptable to be a girl wrestler. And it ended up being the most impactful thing that I ever did with my life because it has led me to being this person that I am today. And initially, I ended up getting burnt out. I was training 3 times a day, cross country in the morning, wrestling practice in the afternoon, then a private wrestling practice with a female coach that would drive in to see me because the boy coaches were like, we don't know what to do with her. So like, let's give her to this girl. So I was training a lot, and it's very reflective of how I end up training now for competition, having to weigh in, having to diet, having to do cardio, like all of these things. Like I've ended up just right back to my roots, which is kind of funny. And then ultimately I burnt myself out because of the expectation from other people, from colleges, getting offers to go wrestle for colleges and realizing like, whoa. I never wanted this to be like my job. And that's when I remember the day that I literally just threw a match, like my senior year. I had beaten this girl a million times before. She was pretty easy competitor, but I was so done and so fed up with like what the coaches expected of me, what I expected of me, maybe what my parents expected of me. And I was just a kid.
Well, I've just learned something new because you've never told me that you threw a match before.
Oh, yeah. I just laid there and was like, because if you lose at that level, if you lose a match, you're out.
Yeah.
So I was getting like rising up the ranks, and if I lost one, then I was kicked out of the tournament. So I literally just like let her win, and I'm hearing the screams from the corner of my female and my male coach, like, what are you doing? Like giving me advice on what I should be doing, and I just didn't care enough. I was just done with that. And the amount of relief that I felt after just throwing that match, because I was like, I can go home, I can eat, I can sleep, I can, be a kid, And so that was the last of that. And I ended up going the complete opposite route and becoming a hairstylist, which is what my mom did. And I've always liked hair and makeup, as you can tell. So I was a makeup artist and a hairstylist for a couple of years. And Zach and I met at the tail end of when I was just fed up with that, because that also wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I learned a lot of lessons from that, like how to talk to people, literally how to talk to strangers, meet them and be like, yo, I'm gonna touch your hair. That was really hard for someone who's naturally introverted and doesn't really want to talk to people in general. So I would just have to like walk up to them and be like, hey, my name is Julia. I'm going to be touching your hair in this really intimate thing. And one of the most important things that my boss at the time actually taught me was when I would go up and do that, I was so nervous, like hands sweating, like shaking. I would like attempt to go, and then I'd like go back, and then I'd do it again, and I'd go back, and he'd be like, short-term uncomfortability for long-term happiness. And I was like, oh, okay. I just have to be uncomfortable for a short amount of time, and then that's it. Like, it's such a short amount of time, and then I could really change this person's life by doing their hair. And inevitably, I found out that that wasn't how I was supposed to serve people. I just was like, looked in the mirror one day and was like, I just saw my life flash before my eyes. I cannot come here every day of my life and do this every single day. It's a hard job, standing on your feet all day, talking to person after person after person, listening to their problems, their issues, things that are going on. They treat you like a therapist. It's a very hard job. While you have to like be dressed to the nines, at least at the salon I worked at, and wearing like heels, hair and makeup all done, getting a bunch of things from other people, like having people dump on you. It was a lot for me at that point. I wasn't ready for it. I think I'd be more prepared for it now, but it wasn't what I wanted to, maybe not. Maybe not.
Be prepared for it because you would never want to do that again.
I wouldn't. I was like, I'm a kid. This is a lot. Like I was like 18 maybe or 19. So then at least going into the fitness aspect of it, at this point, I just completely quit because I was done with wrestling and I was like, I am never dieting again. I literally went the complete opposite way. I was eating whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I wasn't training. I wasn't caring about myself, how my body felt, how I was showing up in the world. I was literally just roboting through life.
Well, and you were also in a relationship that your parents approved of.
Not at that point, though.
Oh, okay.
Maybe towards the tail end of it. Yeah, I was in a relationship he was a great guy. There was really nothing wrong. But once I started going into the more fitness space and I literally rapidly changed my body because once I put my mind to something, like that's just it. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I changed my body rapidly and my habits, and I stopped, eating takeout every single day and having coffee all day instead of water. And like I was talking about earlier, is the people around you are used to this person, and he was used to the person that like would lay in bed all day with him and wake up late and come home and just watch TV all night instead of like working on my side hustle. So he was used to this person that I used to be, and I was changing into somebody that was more aligned with me. And so that ultimately was the end of our relationship because I couldn't see myself with this person long term because he didn't really like who I was becoming. He was never mean about it. He just was trying to pull me away from something that I wanted to do. So I literally just was like, one day I showed up at my mom's house and was like, Mom, I'm quitting the salon and I'm breaking up with Mark. And she was like, what the fuck? And I always ask like her about that moment. And she's like, in that moment, I just thought that she was crazy. It's normal for parents to just fear and be scared for you and scared for how their child is going to make a living. It was a very secure job at one of the most high-end salons in Austin. It was a dream job. It was my dream job, but my dream changed. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to become a bodybuilder. That's what I want to do. I want to coach people. I want to inspire women because I know that what this journey has done for me and how it started physical, but it became all mental. Mm-hmm. And I want to provide that to other people, to let them know that they don't have to stay stuck where they're depressed and they're sad and they're just going through life like a zombie because they think that that's how it has to be. You always have choice. You always have the choice to just go back to your old patterns, your old conditioning, because it's easier. It's simpler. But long term, it's more painful because you end up living a life that never was yours. And I hope that people have this moment a lot quicker than most people because the faster that you hit rock bottom, the faster that you grow.
Yeah, it's being willing to ride the waves of life. We get lost in the expectation that things should be great all the time.
Yeah.
And when they're not great, we question ourselves and doubt ourselves and blame the world, right, for why we are where we are or where we're at.
Yeah, and I definitely did a lot of that during that time. Like when I was hating my job, I was like, it's my boss's fault. They don't pay me enough. They don't treat me well enough. I'm working which was partially true. It was, but ultimately it was my fault. It was my decision to keep getting treated that way until one day I was just like, no. One day I just said no. And that time I actually listened. And so I ended up quitting. And it's funny, I had a poll on my story this morning with someone asking me, like, when did I quit my salon job? And start my own business. So it was in December 2020. And then a couple months later, or December 2019, a couple months later, we went into lockdown. And I started my new business during COVID, which actually ended up propelling me forward faster than I ever thought, because at that time, everybody needed a trainer, an at-home online trainer, more than ever, because gyms were all closed. So what was crazy in that moment too is that there was that shadow of a doubt, because I don't know if I even told Zach this. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make rent, because I had quit the salon. Money was sparse. Like I was not.
We were talking about it.
Yeah. I was like, I really don't know how I'm going to make rent. And I signed my first one-on-one coaching client. And then we went into lockdown, and I was signing tons of people every week. The calls were lining up so much that it was overwhelming. And the reason that I'm saying this is not to be like, hey, I started a business and it worked. Not at all. Because there's that point where I was like, this was a terrible decision. I should go back to my salon job. And that was safe. And now look what I did. I made a leap, and I did something out of the norm, and I'm getting punished for it. Victim. And I signed my first client. Yeah. And that saved me from not being able to pay rent. And then on top of it, it saved me from losing my job for months. Because in hindsight, now that I see it, if I would have stayed at that salon during lockdown, I would have been out of money for a year, because I wouldn't have been able to make money because the salon would have been closed. So by me choosing myself and choosing what was true to me, no matter how scary or uncomfortable or what other people said, because people thought I was crazy. And by doing that, still, in spite of that, I was rewarded. And I really, truly believe that happens in life, is that like when you choose you and you choose what's true to you, no matter what all the chit chat is saying, you're going to get rewarded in some way, whether it's saving you from losing your apartment, whether it's saving you from a really crappy relationship and you end up finding your dream partner, which what happened to me. So many things, like now that I see it, it's like, fuck, that was terrible. It seemed awful, but I was saved by choosing me.
Yeah. You saved yourself.
Yeah.
And most people are conditioned to believe that somebody else needs to save them.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to reflect back, is just honoring you for choosing yourself. And what is the result of that? And the result of that is that you get out of a job that you didn't want to be in, that you save yourself from being financially stressed, for a long amount of time. And through that process, those are the things that you don't want, but the things that you do want comes forward, which is to be able to inspire women and to be who you are today. I mean, everything that you've done so far was created from that choice. And then here we are. And to be able to sit back and say, we talked about the pain part of things. On the purpose aspect of things is that you found your purpose through realizing who you weren't, what you didn't want. And then when you were able to let go of those things, what you really want just revealed itself to you. So that's interesting for me as well, because, I've been, anybody that's been following me vicariously through you, has probably seen a lot of things shift, and shifting more than I would have liked it to shift. I would like to have said that, man, right when I got done with healing, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. And I'll tell you that I did. I just didn't do it. So the thing that I am now in and committed to, and I will be in integrity to, is reforming the entire addiction recovery industry, because it doesn't need to be as long as it is. You don't need 12 steps to heal. You don't need to go to a recovery center for 90 days to heal. Matter of fact, I feel like the recovery center just takes you away from the temptation. But again, you really start healing when the temptation is there and you don't choose it. You choose yourself. And then the 12-step process is broken from the premise, which is that, hi, my name's Zach. I'm a sex addict. That premise is what keeps you feeling and also believing that you're an addict. And it's my stance that you're not an addict, but you might be addicted. And that's the same thing that I said when I said that thing, when I said, it's not me, but I did do that. And that's where my purpose is coming to now, especially for guys with porn addiction and even women that struggle with it at this point. But we're in the millions, and when I mean millions, I mean the 9-figure millions of people that suffer with this. We might be able to stretch it out to billions. I can't confirm that, but there are also studies that can confirm the 9-figure millions of people that are struggling with porn use. Now, whether that's an addiction or whether it's a habit they would rather not be doing, it's still causing some sort of suffering, some sort of pain. And I rejected that. And I rejected that out of this. I rejected it because it's not glamorous in my mind, my ego. Because my ego sees me as, being on stage and talking about these principles and being rather deep but thin. And what I mean by that is like the things that I talk about, people will tell me, man, that's really deep. But it's also really thin because I'm just giving you generalized information that you might think is true, but it's not really doing the deep work with it. And that's actually what really fills my soul up, which is why I've been feeling a little bit unfulfilled, is because, I realized that I was in hell, and then I figured out how to get out of hell, create a little map, and I was afraid to go back to hell. But I'm going back to hell with a map. So I'd be like, hey, man, you want to get out of here? I got a map. Let's get out of here. And then realize that even though I'm in hell, I'm not deterred by it. And that's, again, these are all stories in my mind. So anybody that's thinking about this in this way, what I mean by hell is suffering. And I didn't want to revisit that because I was like, oh, I'm so happy to be free of it.
Yeah. I ain't looking back.
Yeah. But then I realized that I'm not free, even though I'm free of it. Because I'm not free, because my purpose, my soul's calling is to help others that have gone through the same thing, that have my experience. Because no matter how many times I share my story, I get people to reach out to me and say, oh my God, your story is exactly like mine. Well, that's because another experiential truth is what's most personal is most universal. So now I realize, and when I say realize, I knew that this is where I should go. I rejected it. I did a lot of great things. I don't want to take away from what I've done with men since then, but it just hasn't been directed towards what my purpose is. And now I realize that all the different ways that I was gaslighting my own self, that was preventing me from stepping into something that, although doesn't seem glamorous, has the potential to transform millions and millions of lives and to get them out of the suffering that I experienced. And what is more fulfilling than that? I can't think of anything. So these principles, the things that we're talking about, like I said, they work for everything. They work for you. They work for addicts. They work for people pleasers. They work for anybody that is in the middle of realizing that they aren't who they want to be. And the pathway to that is what we've put together.
Self-discovery.
Yeah. I like the KYP. I don't know why I think about KYP, but like something triggers inside of me.
KYP.
No, I don't know if it was like a TV commercial or something like that makes me think of it. I don't know. Anyways, but yeah. Know your power.
Yes.
Know your power program.
Yes. Well, guys, I hope this gave you some insight at least to both of our journeys and, what we're still working through every single day. It's a journey. There's no end destination. You just keep building off of what you learn and your experiences, and you just keep getting better and better. And this program is going to do just that. So we're so excited to finally share it with you. If you haven't checked it out already, it'll be the first link in the description. And thank you, Zach, for coming on.
It's my honor, baby. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. You can
Shoot.
The Julia Show.
Yep. I love you, baby.
I love you too. And as always, we love you all so much. You are more powerful than you think. Bye.